And now we return to Ukraine. Critical Patriot shortages leave the country vulnerable to ballistic missile attacks. Large-scale protests to reinstate the now former defense minister persist, and Ukraine turns its sights on the Amazon of Russia to pressure the economy. Joining me to discuss these developments and more is Diane Francis, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Hello, Diane, and thank you so much for joining us on World News Tonight.
You're welcome.
Now, starting off with these latest attacks in Ukraine, of course, overnight, the death toll still rising from them. We have over 24 wounded. We've got at least 10 who have been killed in this attack. President Zelensky said that only one ballistic missile was shot down and that there are no Patriots left. So what is the short-term fix for Ukraine to defend itself? I would imagine there have to be allies of Ukraine that have to have some Patriots tucked away somewhere. Is that potentially something that Ukraine needs to get its hands on?
Well, it was very disappointing that Donald Trump made a big deal about licensing Patriot technology to Ukraine at the NATO summit in Turkey, and now he's sort of pulling back on that promise. This is really dire for Ukraine. So, what is being discussed is that there are about 7 European countries who have Patriots, or they are able to make or are making components for Patriots. So they've really got to get their acts together and provide Ukraine with the power it needs, because right now Putin's bombing with ballistic missiles and drones of Kyiv in particular is the only part of the war where he is winning hands down and is trying to impose leverage on the government to surrender, which of course they won't. It's very serious, but I think that it can be fixed. For instance, Germany, one person suggested, has the financial wherewithal to, finance new Patriots from the American existing stock, speed them along to get them to Ukraine, and then, they have their own stock and so on. So something has got to be done, because the carnage is daily, and it's not going to affect the outcome of the war, I don't think, but it certainly is hurting the morale of the people.
Certainly. Now, Donald Trump has said in his latest statement on Friday, he said that basically he's concerned that Ukraine could eventually turn on the United States, and you have to be careful with weapons transfers of such sophistication. But with that being said, Germany, as you mentioned, actually is one of the few countries on the planet that is able to produce Patriot missiles, if not most of their components. Poland is another one that's been granted permission to produce some of the components. With these stockpiles reaching critical levels, is it high time for Germany or Japan even to start cranking out Patriot missiles and potentially become a solution to supply Ukraine?
Yes, they've got to do this. There's no question about it. And in the meantime, there are, as I say, 7 countries in Europe that have components, or they have the components that are missing in Ukraine right now that could complete a full battery for a Patriot that is not operational. So they've just got to suck it up. Ukraine is taking the blows on their behalf. They've got to take a chance and give Ukraine everything they can so that it can defend itself with the Patriots, because these are the only things that really work. And I don't think this is beyond impossible. According to what I'm told, there's plenty of stuff around, and that can be done very quickly and financed.
Now, if Ukraine was to be granted the right to produce these missiles, how long do you think would it take to get the production up and going and actually produce these PAC-3 interceptors?
Well, it's very complex, but the Ukrainians are gifted in terms of engineering and technology and manufacturing. And, when Trump talked about licensing to Ukraine, Zelensky said, we could have our own Ukrainian-made Patriot defenders within, by the end of the year. And I believe that they could do that. I mean, they're a pretty exceptional nation. So what I think now has to happen is that there has to be an inventory among all of its allies, and they've got to get what they can get hold of and put it together as quickly as possible. And I think that that could be doable. The other thing that's coming down the pike, however, is that in a few months, hopefully before the winter, Ukraine will have ballistic missiles of its own, and then Russia's got to look out.
Right, and there was also talk of potential interceptors costing just a fraction of that of Patriots. Hopefully something can be done on that front. Moving on now, I'd like to ask you about these protests. I mean, we've seen these massive protests trying to get the defense minister, Fedorov, reinstated as defense minister. Zelensky has already let Syrskyi go. It seems like that was the minimum. But what's next? Will Zelensky have to give in to the pressure and reinstate Fedorov?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't have to, and I don't think he should. I've been talking to people that are not in Zelensky's party. These are other opposition parties that are in the parliament in Ukraine, and very few of them are big fans of Fedorov. Fedorov got too big for his own britches, to give it an American expression. He not only was Minister of Digital Transformation, which he did a good job at, but there's a lot of technical geniuses in that country. But he wanted to be a full-fledged Minister of Defense, and he has no military background whatsoever. So he started bickering and fighting over what was going on in the war, in the strategy, with Syrskyi, who is a general. I mean, he's a military man. So you have a tech guy who wants to be a general who's never been a general. And he was given certain tasks to perform as a sort of defensive adjunct to the Ministry of Defense, and he didn't fulfill them. For instance, he was supposed to come up with more mobilization plans, raises in pay plans, standardization of deployment plans, and he's never done that. Instead, these two men were bickering. Well, Zelensky can't have the two guys in those positions bickering during a war. Now, Fedorov, to everyone's disappointment, he got fired. Syrskyi got fired because they don't get along, and I understand it, and there'll be good replacements, hopefully. But, Fedorov has not called off these protesters. So you have to wonder if his ulterior motive was actually to become president and not to be a good minister of defense and not to replace the other guy that he bickered with. So, he's not behaving very well, and it's not in the best interests of Ukraine. And in fact, he's aiding and abetting the Russians, and he's not helping his own democracy by not coming forth and say, hey, protesters, it's okay, we're fine, we're all going to work together.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see which direction this heads. But I'd like to shift gears completely right now away from Ukraine and towards this migrant crisis that is affecting Spain and Ceuta. Majority of EU leaders have said that Sanchez has failed to protect the bloc, to protect the Schengen area. There are calls for Spain to be suspended from Schengen or even withdrawn in some of the most extreme instances. What's your take on this whole crisis? Why did it come upon Spain at this time? And are the rest of the European leaders, the majority of European leaders, are they right to criticize Pedro Sanchez?
Well, look, there was a breach, and there were these people that came from Algeria and Morocco, these mostly young men who swam across the bloody ocean, and they ended up in this protectorate area called Ceuta. I don't know how to pronounce it properly, in Spain. It's really not Spain itself. Anyway, there had been a court case, and a loophole was created that anybody who swims to Ceuta, doesn't have a passport or entry or anything, is allowed to stay. Now, they're not allowed to go further, and that is to get into Spain and therefore be part of the European Union as residents. So there was this loophole, and that's why all these guys jumped in the water, and there's quite a few of them. Now, most of them have gone back already. It was pretty peaceful, But the reason why this has been amplified so much is that people are frightened and worried because Europe is very vulnerable to mass migration because it's got wars going on on all of its borders. And they can't be inundated suddenly with people they have not screened properly and that sort of thing. Whether it's boats to Greece or boats from France to Britain or what have you, or these North African migrants. So it looks like it's a pretty small breach. It isn't they are not inside the European Union. Spain is getting picked on, I think, a little unnecessarily. This can happen to anyone. I mean, after all, if you recall what Belarus was pulling on Poland before the invasion by bringing Africans up and then letting them loose at the border into Poland. These are gangs, and they do this all the time. So I think this is a tempest in a teapot. I don't think it's serious, but I understand, and I think Europeans are very correct in making sure that they do not fall prey to the weaponization of migration.
Right, right. And as you noted, most of them have been returned back to Morocco. So that's at least on a positive note. Diane Francis, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, thank you so much for joining us.
Anytime. Thank you.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.